Natural symbols?
Yes.
I was very impressed and influenced by Basil Bernstein's own classification of families. He was interested in children's response to education as is itself influenced by the system of control that the families used. And he himself allied himself with the working class, so-called, and although he wasn't working class in the sense I would use as a word, his father was a furrier. And he thought of the working class as having what he called a positional family, a family in which everybody had a position and you just stayed in your position. I call it a hierarchical family, and I think positional, I'm moving now to calling the whole thing positional. Positional family, you go to bed according to your position in the family, first if you're youngest, second if you're next youngest, and you have your seat at the table, that's your position, and that depends also on gender and age, and everything is done according to work is assigned in the family for cleaning the car or mowing the lawn or scrubbing the doorstep. So women do some things and boys do other things. And I adjusted that to my interest in culture. He had a 2x2 model of it, so he called them weak classification, strong classification. The middle class, striving, as he always said insultingly of the middle class, striving middle class, had a weak positional system, weak authority. It was all personal, it wasn't on positions. Do it because I said so, and do it because I ask you. Not because I said so, that's authority, but because I ask you. Why should I be quiet when the mother says be quiet? Dad is trying to sleep, but that doesn't matter. Well, yes, he'd wake up, he'd be sad, Great play on feelings and emotions in the middle classes as a system of control. So I thought that was so neat, and I adjusted that. For him, the children who'd been brought up on the personal system were lost when they got to school, because they were expecting personal emotions, and they found, in fact, it was positions when they got to school, and performance according to position. And I thought it was very rich and powerful analysis, and I adjusted it for kinds of religions and for kinds of societies that can produce the kind of religion, and that was the basis of natural symbols. So that I had positional religions belonging to positional societies. So on.
Yes, I remember. What was the bit about the Bog Irish?
That would be positional. The Irish had a very positional idea about religion generally. And therefore I think it fits well with a rather static economy, where striving won't do you any good anyway.
How is it different from the famous distinction between status and contract?
Not very at all. Except it's got 4 corners except 2 instead of 2. The 2 corners that status and contract leave out are the ones in which, as a group separates itself from the mainstream, or an individual can be separated from the mainstream, probably without wishing to. And those give you the sectarian, what I call enclave culture, which is very distinctive and very worse, starting especially in connection with terrorism. And the individualists, the private individuals who are more and more alone, the more the economy becomes one in which you can work at home and not have anything to do with anybody else.
So, when was it that you retired, or at least went to America? Because
yes, 1976. 77.
Yeah, you were still pretty young, weren't you? I mean, it wasn't retirement really.
No, I had a job. I was invited to
the Russell Sage
Foundation. Yes, that's right.
Why did you do that, do you think?
Because my friend invited me, and Jim was ready to leave here, England, at that point. And I'd been 27 years in one place. I needed a change. I also hoped to get graduate students.
Did you?
I didn't have long in the research, because the friend who invited me to go and join his team, his new team, he was just starting it, got the sack within 3 months. So that didn't work very well. I stayed on to finish the year.
That was Wiladsky or whatever.
Wildowski, yes.
Wildowski.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you enjoy America?
Yes, I loved it. I'm very glad I did it. We stayed there 11 years. Yeah.
What was it about
I
it?
tried to come back but couldn't get a job because Mrs. Thatcher started to cut down on universities. Universities started to cut down. I didn't stay in that job, obviously, because it disappeared. I taught in Northwestern and I taught in Princeton. That was it. In Northwestern I was in the religion department, which was a pity because I just got interested in risk. And I was working on risk while they were working on religion. I wasn't really taking advantage of my surroundings. But it was from there that I got an invitation to give the Gifford lectures on natural religion. And 3 years warning. If you ever do something with 3 years warning, you realise much too much. You don't know what, get into a real tizzy about an important thing you've got to do in 3 years. So I started somebody chanced to ask me to come and talk to her students about the anthropology of sacrifice. Her students were the Princeton Theological Seminary. And so I went, found that they all knew much more about it than I did. And it was, what I said was very naive and simple compared with what the Bible scholars knew. As I started to read the Bible, she asked me to take a section from the Book of Numbers and explain it to them. But they all understood much better than I did. And I was totally mystified by the Book of Numbers and decided that I would give the Book of Numbers the basis, make it the basis for my Gifford lectures. And that's what started me on my present work.
I see. Well, just to backtrack a tiny bit, why did you get interested in risk? I mean, it's a very fashionable subject now.
Yes, Aaron. Aaron, it is still fashionable. At that stage, it was absolutely on top of the world. It was really fashionable then.
It's really fashionable now, too.
Is it?
Well, risk aversion and risk, you know, all the terrorism and all the...
Of course, it should be. Well, at that time, Aaron read one of my articles and asked me to join him because of that. It was the one about the environment's at risk. And I wasn't thinking of risk as a subject. But when I got there to work with him, we both found that the whole field was dominated by a psychometric theory of aversion, which is entirely individualist. There was absolutely no room for cultural pressures for people, for sharing points of view or for sharing risks. It was completely unreal, I think. Unreal in the fullest sense. And so we set up together, and with his help, I wrote Risk and Culture, which he tried to integrate the recognized problems about a theory of risk into a cultural framework of kinds of risk takers, and that's the book we wrote, Risk and Culture. And after that, I think we won. I think people really took account of the social aspects of risk taking. Although it was a very hard struggle against the individualist position. But just to know what an individual is enough. You don't need to know anything else according to this position. But we were trying to insist on trying to understand varieties of cultures and how cultures depend on social forms and how social forms are largely a matter of our will, our wish to collaborate this way or that, and of permitting circumstances.
Yeah, and that's fine. But then you worked on consumption with Baron Isherwood.
That was before.
Well, it was before.
Before I took the world of goods with me when I went to America, and that was fulfilling a long-term ambition. I really wanted to understand. I thought that the economists working on money, really from a sort of Keynesian background, would have wonderful formulae with summarizing theories about cultural movements, culturally held, what's the word, shared ideas. But they didn't really, but I enjoyed studying it. It was a long felt wish to study economics. And Baron was great.
I've always wondered whether he was a baron or whether that was his Christian name.
His Christian name.
His Christian name.
Let's call it his first name.
His first name, yes. Fine. So, what was it about America that you liked most at that time, do you think? It was just the optimism, or the resources, or the people, or what?
Obviously it was the people I met and the warmth. I think I particularly liked the women's culture. In English academics' life, there isn't a women's culture. At least there wasn't then. There might be now. But in America, they'd started having women's academic associations. There was one called Now in Northwestern. what does it stand for? National something women.
Mm.
I can't remember. Anyway, the women were much more supportive of each other and friendly, and it was very delightful. That's what I think I particularly liked, compared with people that we've been interviewing in academic life here.
And then when you came back, you didn't come back to another teaching job in...
No, I was too old.
Mm.
I was, it was 88 when we came back.
Yes.
So how old was I? 1921?
1921. Yes, 67, the time.
Yes, it was past retirement, yes. Yes, that was after, I'd already spent 3 years in Princeton. That was a great joy. I really enjoyed Princeton better than anything else. I was back there last month.
Did you?
No, December.
Has it changed?
Since December, since I was there before?
Yes.
Not that I could see. The same old friends were there too.
That's nice. And then you mentioned you started to work on the Book of Numbers, and
Yes, that was the Gifford lecture. And I really had a nerve to do that and give the lecture on it. I wanted to read it as an anthropologist. And in the end I did write the book of the lecture called In the Wilderness. But at the time I hadn't, and it was a very jejune sort of simple lecture about Moses and Miriam and Aaron. I think it must have been terribly boring. I'm glad there's no record of it. But Graham Auld, who was the host for the Gifford Lectures that year, who was at the Divinity School in Edinburgh, came out to me afterwards, very, very courteous and hospitable host. Chivalrous, I would say, more than courteous, because this is what happened. He said, have you read any, I just wondered hearing you reading from the text, have you read any of the commentaries on the Book of Numbers? I hadn't. So in a haughty way, sort of anthropological arrogance, I said, no, in anthropology we prefer to read the primary text first. Well, it's the most absurd thing you could ever imagine to say, because there's no primary text in the Bible. There's hundreds of texts. And there's millions of commentaries, and how to do it without reading them is quite crazy, and real cheek on my part to do it at all, especially to answer him like that. But we remained friends. It's amazing. And then I got so interested in it afterwards. When I began to read the commentaries and found that they dismissed it. Most of the commentaries said it was badly constructed, a mess. The junk room of the Bible is what Bellhausen said. And I was so indignant, because anthropologists can't dismiss their sources like that. We have to take the source as it is, very, very seriously. And so then I found that so far from being disorderly, it was a brilliantly conceived and executed ring composition. That's to say, a chiastic structure. Does that make sense?
Chiastic.
Yes, means A, B, C, B, A. As if it was a poem that you were giving the last rhyme lines for. But it's a ring is a ring because it goes back to the beginning, and then it has problems in making it the mid-turn. All the meanings are tucked into the mid-turn, and the rest of it the book, as it were, seems when it's finished to spring out from the mid-term rather than go to the end. So if you read it in a linear fashion, as if the whole thing was a line, like our writing, our modern writing, you don't realize that it's all in the middle, and you generally miss the meaning. So I've had a lot of fun ever since studying that form and showing how they've been misread.
And do biblical scholars take it seriously now?
They've always taken it seriously, because they thought that they've always taken that subject seriously. But mostly it's been done so lightly and so, I think, almost frivolously, light-heartedly, without expecting the meaning to be different. And mine hasn't had much chance. Nobody reads the Book of Numbers anyway, because of its bad reputation. So my book hasn't really made much waves. Nobody's said much about it. But then I applied it to Leviticus. And Leviticus has much more interesting, wonderful structure. Have I got time to tell you?
Yes, do.
It's not my door. Leviticus is a picture poem. That's to say that it's not a ring in the strict sense of a fully developed ring with a middle and A, B, C, D, E, D, C, B, A structure, but it's got a three-part structure, and I don't know how I got to it, but the whole thing is modelled on the temple, not on the temple, on the tabernacle, which has got a big open court at the beginning, where everybody must bring their private sacrifices, and then there's a story, all the rest of its laws, a short and rather sinister, bad story about sons of Aaron being killed because they insulted the tabernacle. And then you go through that as if it was a door, if you were thinking of the level of the building instead of the level of the book. And then you've got an entrance to the priest's sanctuary, where the priests have all their business, and they don't live there, but they eat there and they worship there, but it's a priest's corner where nobody but priests are allowed to go in. And then the next one, there's another story, another equally punitive story, very short. And then you're into the Holy of Holies, which is tiny. So it goes from a large place to a small place to a tiny place. And the culmination is the covenant, which is kept in the Holy of Holies. And only the high priest can go there. So there's restricted entry at 3 levels. And so you look at the book and realize that and you have other clues for thinking it's the same as the same structure, the same proportions as the tabernacle. You realize that the first part, which is a ring, is very, very large. And it's all about sacrifice, and it's about individual sacrifice. When and why an individual and how can make a sacrifice to God. The second part is all about the priests, what they can eat, what they can do, who they can marry, and the sacrifices they've got to perform for public purposes, public sacrifices. It goes through the last door, and it's all about the covenant. The word covenant keeps coming up. It's very, very small, 3 little tiny chapters. And it's the place where the covenant is kept is honoured in this book of Leviticus by the description of the covenant. So it's a very elaborate literary style, and it's called a picture poem, where it's repeated elsewhere. Do you know about the picture poems? Very fashionable in England in the 17th century. And
possibly through Frances Yates's work on the art of memory.
She's so important for me, yes, absolutely. You think of a house in her book, and this is exactly like the tabernacle one, and you go into it, you're making a speech, you're a student of Cicero and you're making a speech, and you have to think of it, the first part of it is like going up the stairs to the main hall, and then you turn to the right and you go into a room there, and that's the second part of your speech. The third part is you turn to the left and go into the other room, and that's the third part of your speech, and then you come down the stairs again, the way you came up, so you repeat the section. It's wonderful, and that's very important for me in description of it. The picture poems you take are very important in 4th century Greek literature. Little poems, a pipe, an altar, a bird with open wings, a lute to play on, or a flute, and you make your poem so that each line is cut, so that visually on the page, by the time you've cut the lines, you've got a silhouette of the thing your poem's about. So it's reaching you at 2 levels, visual and verbal. And this was very, very popular. Herbert did a lot of
it. Yes, the famous dove.
Yes, Easter wings.
Yes, Easter wing.
And so Leviticus was an early one of those. Yeah, very early.
That sounds fascinating. I interviewed Jonathan Bentall recently, and he was enthusing about your work on Leviticus and saying how fascinating it was. I suppose
how nice of him.
The question really is, rather like Levi-Strauss's interpretation of myth, how would you know whether you were right?
Yeah.
Except on aesthetic grounds.
How objective can it be? Yes, very. Very objective. For instance, the Book of Numbers. The system has one in which the words have to be repeated on both sides of the divide. The poem is divided in half, or the book. And the middle and the first part must correspond to each other. Correspond in using the same words very often and repeating the theme, so that in Leviticus, it's all about how the first beginning part is about how the Levites are going to revolt. In the middle, they revolt, and they're punished, and as was threatened. So the correspondence is very, very strong, and it must stand out. Nobody could deny that, you see. But the words also are objectively checkable. This is how I got to it, really. When I heard about it and thought that this might be the structure of numbers, have you got time to get this? I noticed this part about the beginning of numbers. The Levites are going to revolt, and look out for them. They'll be killed. They will die. They will die. And then I got to what I found was, oh yes, it's strictly divided into legal parts and narrative parts. So it's law, story, story. And the story parts go on round consecutively, so that it's the people of Israel. They set out, they go first, and then they go next, and then they arrive, and then they arrive finally, and they get back to the River Jordan and they're home. And so that's the story parts, but the legal parts seem to interrupt them, and that's where it got its reputation for being so disorderly. And people have tried the idea that the law parts are related to the story parts, but they're not. They don't belong there. The law parts are the structure. And the ways of telling whether you're into a law part or a story part are objective. I can give them to you, but I got a Hebrew Bible scholar to do it for me, following my instincts, and he found that they were much strongly marked than I thought. The very ones I thought were very, very strongly marked. Want to hear how? Yeah, you do? Every story starts with a name of a people or persons, like Moses said, or Moses did, or the people of Israel. And it starts with a place, when they got to this particular place, at this place, Moses said, and it's got a time, on the 7th day or the 12th month or something. So that all the stories located immediately, and then the story develops a plot and has an ending, little story. But the laws have nothing like that. They're forever, you see. And they start with the Lord said to Moses, do this and do that. It's just a law. There's no doubt about it. And the markings are much stronger than I had thought they would be, if you know Hebrew. Because they're poetic structures as well. So when I found the beginning and the middle were a strong correspondence like that, I thought, well, why 12 sections? There's 12. Is it the zodiac? Is it the year? What is it? Why 12? Why is it the 12 sons of Jacob? What is it? And somebody said to me this thing about the Sephirot, which are the big universal principles that underlie the whole mystic universe in Hebrew mythology. And the 12 of them are related to the months of the year. So I thought, right, well, if this is the beginning of the year, and Jewish custom has 2 new years, so the 7th section, I'm counting my sections, you see, the 7th and the 1st correspond like this. What happens to the equinoxes? See, so that would be section 3 and section 10. Section 4 and section 10. Laws. So the first ones are stories, but the cross sections, middle ones, are laws. And it said, so I read it anxiously to see if there's any correspondence, and it starts out very short, and it says, the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons to make 2 silver trumpets and to blow them, and you shall blow them on all your assemblies and for all wars, and you shall blow them twice for alarms, and on the 7th month you shall blow them on this day of the 7th month. So go anxiously across to number 10, and it says, oh no, sorry, I left out the crucial word. You should blow them on the 7th month, and you should blow them for all your appointed feasts. So you go across, and it says, these are your appointed feasts. I just had goose flesh when I saw that. And then it tells you, at the end of that section, it says, and you shall blow your trumpets on the 7th month, 7th day, 7th month. So that kind of evidence, somebody can gainsay it. People have quarrelled by saying, look, the word trumpet is different in the 2 cases. but the word blow isn't. And so on. So that started me on this, that I'm still on. My book that's in press now is on ring conversation.
What is it called?
It's called Thinking in Circles.
Thinking in Circles.
Mm.
Lovely. Well, thank you for giving us a prelude to it. It looks fascinating. Is there anything that you feel we should have touched on and we haven't?
No, I don't think so. I think you've been very good. You covered everything.
The only person you mentioned as being, you mentioned Godfrey EP on religion, and then you mentioned Ernest Gellner's.
And Steiner.
And Steiner.
Mm.
Did you know Ernest?
Yes, yes, yes.
How did you get on with her?
I didn't get on very well in the sense that we never saw each other very much. But I always admired him very greatly. I was sorry he went off into nationalism, because that was so vague compared with his brilliant fieldwork.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For a fascinating interview.
Thank you
Mary.
for giving me the chance to let off all that steam.
Lovely.